Nietzsche once advised, "When you go to woman, take your whip." It's a shocking provocation, one that grabs you by the collar right from the start. But what if that whip is not a weapon of leather, but of silence and self-mastery? What if not speaking, holding one's tongue and one's frame, is the ultimate way to outsmart women without saying a word? In this intense exploration, we channel Nietzsche on women, dissecting his brutal wisdom and blending it with modern insight. This is not about cruelty or gamesmanship. It's about understanding the philosophy of gender dynamics at its most primal level and discovering the silent power that lies in presence, in action, in simply being. Picture a scene. A heated argument brews between a man and a woman. Voices rise like a storm, accusations and retorts fly. Then suddenly, the man falls quiet, not in defeat, but in defiance. His silence is deliberate, a calm eye in the hurricane. The woman's words swirl around him, searching for purchase, but they cannot stir the depth of his composure. In that charged silence, something profound happens. The balance of power shifts. The one who remains unfazed, who refuses to be emotionally yanked by a rope of words, begins to outsmart the other without uttering a single syllable. This is the power Nietzsche hints at, a silent strength that speaks louder than any shouted argument. To Nietzsche, relationships between men and women were not polite romances of equals exchanging sweet nothings. No, he saw a battle of instincts and wills, often hidden beneath the courteous veneer of society. In his time, the psychology of attraction was cloaked in layers of Victorian propriety, but Nietzsche peeled those layers back. He claimed that what passes for love is often a battlefield of power. Men idealize women, placing them on pedestals of purity and virtue, but in doing so, men often deceive themselves. Man's love, Nietzsche wrote, is unjust to woman. He doesn't truly want the truth from her as he does from himself. He wants comfort. He wants her to be peace. But woman is not peace. He dared to suggest that men don't love a woman herself so much as an image of her, a fantasy crafted to make themselves feel secure or noble. Underneath that illusion lies something more raw. The real woman, with her own will, passions, and yes, her own power. And power, Nietzsche believed, was something women had honed in ways men barely noticed. Deprived of direct control in a male-dominated world, women learned the arts of subtlety and influence. Think of the great queens and courtesans of history, women like Cleopatra, who bent the will of Roman emperors not with brute force, but with charm and strategic allure. Or the countless unsung wives and mothers who steered the fates of families from behind the scenes, often wordlessly. Nietzsche saw women as warriors of the indirect. In his eyes, they had mastered the battlefield of appearances and emotions. His philosophy of gender dynamics was less about any polite ideal of equality and more about an eternal dance of dominance and resistance, each side with its weapons. Men had their laws, money, and muscles. Women had their wit, grace, and the ability to make men believe they were in charge, even as those men unknowingly danced to the women's tune. Consider a real-life example from the annals of philosophy. Socrates, the wisest man in Athens, was married to Xanthippe, a woman legendary for her fiery temper and sharp tongue. She was said to be the most ill-tempered woman in the city. One day, after Socrates calmly dismissed her scolding with patient silence, Xanthippe, furious at his lack of reaction, dumped a pot of filthy water over his head. Socrates, unflappable, simply smiled and quipped, After thunder comes the rain. He didn't shout or strike back. He didn't need to. With a single quiet joke, he diffused her rage and proved that her tantrum had not rattled him. That is silent power. Socrates outsmarted a furious woman without raising his voice, in fact, barely speaking at all. It's a timeless illustration. The moment you overreact, you lose. But if you keep your center and refuse to be provoked, you win without ever having to fight. Nietzsche understood this kind of power too. He often wrote that true strength is shown not by aggression, but by self-control. Imagine Nietzsche observing a modern couple on a date. One man tries desperately to impress his companion with flamboyant stories, constant flattery, and nervous chatter, doing verbal cartwheels to win her approval. His eyes dart anxiously for validation. The woman smiles politely, but her attention drifts. She's heard a dozen suitors jabber on before. At a nearby table sits a different kind of man, calm, at ease in his own skin. He listens more than he talks. When he speaks, his voice is low and steady, and only when he has something meaningful to say. An easy half-smile plays on his lips as he meets her gaze. When silence falls, he doesn't rush to fill it with cliches or bragging. He just holds that quiet moment, comfortable in it. Now ask yourself, in these two scenarios, who holds more intrigue? Who is more likely to earn respect or linger in her mind afterward? Modern psychology of attraction tells us what Nietzsche's instinct already knew. It is so often the quiet confidence, not the loud display, that truly captivates. In an age of endless noise, the rare man who can sit with silence stands out like a calm island in a sea of commotion. This isn't mere conjecture. Science backs it up. Studies on social behavior show that nonverbal cues and body language often speak louder than words. A strong, open posture, steady eye contact, a relaxed but poised stance. These signal confidence on a primal level. We humans are always reading these signals, whether consciously or not. A man who can be silent, who isn't compelled to nervously chatter, telegraphs that he is comfortable with himself, perhaps even dominant in his own quiet way. And dominance here isn't about oppressing anyone, it's about mastery of oneself. It's the kind of inner strength Nietzsche celebrated in his idea of the will to power, not a power over others in the petty sense, but the power to command oneself, to shape one's own character and instincts. Such a man, in Nietzsche's eyes, is on the path to becoming something greater. In a sense, he could be seen as an Übermensch in the arena of social relations, one who has risen above the common anxieties and neediness that plague so many. Let's step back into Nietzsche's world for a moment. 19th century Europe was a society of rigid manners, where men and women played elaborate roles. Men wore the mask of chivalry, women the mask of modesty. But behind closed doors, the same eternal tango of influence persisted. Nietzsche admired women who defied the narrow expectations of their era, women who were thinkers, rebels, forces of nature beyond the domestic sphere. Take Lou Andrea Salome, the brilliant young Russian woman Nietzsche adored. Free-spirited and refusing to be possessed, she enchanted Nietzsche and tormented him by rejecting his marriage proposals not once but twice. Imagine the blow to his pride. Here was a woman he could not outwit or charm into loving him. Nietzsche was left heartbroken while Lou charted her own remarkable path. It's tempting to think this sharpened his remarks about women. He had gazed into the abyss of a woman's will and found it staring back, unyielding. Perhaps he learned that you cannot talk a strong woman into submission. Something more elemental, a contest of character and will, silent and deep, was at play. So how does one outsmart a woman without saying a word? The answer, hinted at by Nietzsche and echoed by wise men through the ages, lies in mastering yourself, not manipulating her. It's a kind of silent warfare of the spirit, where victory isn't about humiliation, but about resilience. The battlefield here is emotional energy and composure. Women, as Nietzsche noted, often test men in subtle ways. A teasing comment, an intentional silence, a look meant to provoke. They do this not out of cruelty, but almost as an instinctual probe for strength. It's an echo of countless generations in which a woman's well-being could depend on the fortitude of her mate. Will he anger easily? Will he crumble under pressure? Is his kindness a sign of strength, or is it a cover for weakness? Such questions are asked not in words, but in gestures, in moments of quiet observation. And the man's answer must also be given without words. Women test men not through words, but through energy. The moment you take the bait and overreact, raising your voice, growing defensive or desperate, is the moment you show your hand and forfeit the higher ground. But if you recognize the test for what it is and meet it with a poised silence or a calm, simple response, you convey an answer stronger than any argument, that you are unshakable. The instant you refuse to be easily provoked, the game, if there is one, shifts in your favor. Throughout history, the greatest leaders and lovers alike understood the power of not reacting in haste. Think of Ulysses, known also as Odysseus, a man renowned for his cunning. When he finally returned home to Ithaca after 20 long years, he found his palace overrun with arrogant suitors trying to win his wife Penelope. Did he burst in speaking grand speeches? No. He watched quietly in the guise of a beggar, studying their character. His silence was his strategy until the perfect moment to act. In love and war alike, patience and quiet observation can prove as powerful as a sword. Nietzsche, of course, was not suggesting that men become mute statues or emotionless rocks. He himself was a fiery soul, prone to poetic outbursts and passions. But he understood the difference between controlled fire and an out-of-control blaze. Think of it this way. You harness your passions, your anger, your desire, your ego, like a skilled rider breaking a wild horse. In a tense moment with a woman, maybe she's upset with you, or testing your limits with sharp words, you feel that hot surge inside your chest. The average man might snap back defensively, or blurt out an apology just to placate her. But a man cultivating silent power does something different. He pauses. He takes a slow breath. He remembers that he is the master of himself, not the heat of the moment. Perhaps he even allows a small, knowing smile to surface. Not mockery, but a sign of confidence. That pause, that quiet calm, is powerful. It forces the dynamic to shift. The woman, expecting either an angry eruption or a cowering retreat, instead finds a tranquil strength in front of her. In that pause, you have already won the unseen contest. You have shown that you stand on solid ground while the emotional storm passes around you. Often, the storm will pass and respect will remain in place of tempest. This dynamic isn't just ancient theory. It plays out in our modern social lives every day. Consider the social commentary of our times. Many men, in trying to appeal to women, have been taught to be ever accommodating, endlessly communicative, to spill every feeling on demand. Communication is vital, yes, but there is a difference between honest openness and pouring out your soul in desperation. Too many men eager to please end up betraying their own dignity, apologizing for who they are, or clamoring for approval. Nietzsche would likely shake his head, not because kindness is wrong, kindness is a virtue, but because lack of self-respect invites no respect. If you bend too easily, you break. If you fill every silence with nervous chatter, you reveal your anxiety. Think of a time on social media or texting. A woman doesn't reply for a while. The insecure man bombards her with messages, each one digging his hole deeper, whereas the man of silent confidence leaves it be and goes about his life until she returns of her own will. One of these men is living as his own center of gravity. The other has thrown his center at someone else's feet. It's here that modern psychology of attraction and Nietzschean wisdom converge. Psychologists today talk about how confidence and a secure sense of self are deeply attractive. We know people are drawn to those who have a rich life and healthy self-esteem, not those who cling or crumble. Nietzsche, of course, might phrase it more dramatically. He'd speak of masters and slaves even in love. Are you the master of your own soul or a slave to your passions and fears? The man who is master of himself has no need to shout or show off. His very being commands attention. By contrast, the man enslaved by his anxieties might try to hide his weakness behind a flood of words and ostentatious displays. But those chains rattle unmistakably in every forced laugh and every overly eager plea. In silent mastery, there are no chains at all, and that kind of freedom has a gravitational pull on others. The less you seem to need anyone's validation, the more others naturally want to validate you. Yet, not all silence is virtuous. A coward's silence, the silence of avoiding truth or responsibility, is not what we champion here. The silence we mean is active, not passive. Think of a tiger prowling, all potential energy and focus, not a trace of fear. Or recall how Jesus, when confronted with accusations and hatred, mostly stood silent, answering only with a few profound words like, "You say that I am," and letting his accusers choke on the quiet. Consider the Zen master who meets every tough riddle from a student with nothing but a calm gaze or a slight smile, speaking volumes without a single word. That is the kind of silence full of presence and intention. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, tweet, and shout their opinion, such silence is not empty. It's saturated with power. Bringing this idea into a modern context, imagine a tense business negotiation. A female executive throws a challenging question or a pointed remark at a man to test his confidence. If he stammers and scrambles to please, offering long-winded excuses, she sees she can bend him. But if he pauses for a moment, meets her gaze, and responds briefly and calmly, or simply smiles and waits, he shows he cannot be rattled. Respect often follows. Or consider a more personal moment. A woman tells a man she's not sure how she feels about the relationship. The first man panics. He begs her not to leave, flooding her with words, promises, tears, unintentionally pushing her further away with his desperation. The second man hears her out, nods thoughtfully and says, "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm here." Then he truly gives her that time and space, continuing to live his life. No pestering, no pressure, just a steady presence. Many times, it's the second man, the one who isn't afraid of the silence between them, who ends up with her genuine affection. Why?
because he didn't try to force or beg for an outcome. He showed that his world doesn't collapse over a moment of uncertainty, that he has the strength to handle his own emotions. That kind of composure is reassuring and surprisingly attractive. Of course, there are no guarantees in the realm of love. Human hearts are too free for formulas. But remember, this isn't about some slick trick. It's a philosophy of being. It's a way of life where depth matters more than show, substance over style. You become someone who doesn't chase validation at every turn because you carry your value within. And here's the irony. The less you seek to impress, the more you impress. The less you strive to win, the more you win respect. Nietzsche's writings may be over a century old, but his insight here remains vital.
He shows that behind our polite conventions, the game of power still hums underneath. To transcend the ordinary, we must cultivate extraordinary self-awareness and discipline. He challenges men to move beyond any resentment or fear of women and meet them on higher ground, a place of mutual strength. He wouldn't want men to become misogynists or manipulators. He'd want them to overcome their own weakness. Become who you are, he famously advised. Craft yourself into your highest potential. If right now you are easily swayed by every breeze of opinion or the next pretty face, then you have work to do. Nietzsche's call is to toughen up, not cruelly, but nobly. Build an inner citadel of values and confidence, so that when you meet a woman of great intellect or beauty, you do not shrink, nor must you puff yourself up with false bravado. You simply stand as an equal, silently conveying, "I am worthy of you, and whether or not you join me, I remain whole." Imagine for a moment a world where more people embodied this silent strength. Interactions would be less plagued by misunderstanding and manipulation, because nobody would be so desperately performing a part. A man and a woman could meet as two sovereign individuals, each grounded in self-respect, engaging in a dance of courtship or conversation that is graceful and free, instead of tangled in hidden agendas or frantic attempts to impress. That is the vision that emerges when we apply Nietzschean insight to the psychology of attraction and our contemporary philosophy of gender dynamics. It's not a war of the sexes at all in this vision. It's an elevation of both, each challenging the other to rise in authenticity and character. So, how do you outsmart women without saying a word? You do it by realizing that often there is no outsmarting to do in the usual sense. There is only the mastery of self that sets the stage for genuine connection, or, if need be, a graceful exit. You do it by remembering that every time you choose a measured silence over a rash outburst, you are asserting control over the one person you can control, yourself. And in that control lies an almost magnetic force. Nietzsche, with his intense and searing gaze into human nature, might well smile a fierce little smile at this conclusion. The secret was simple all along. Power isn't in the tongue, it's in the spine. It's in the straightness of your back, the steadiness of your gaze, and the silence you can hold when you're confident enough not to fill it. Outsmarting women, in the end, isn't about beating anyone at some game. It's about rising above the need to play trivial games at all. It's about meeting the eyes of the eternal feminine, as the poet Goethe called it, with a respect and strength that need no boast. In that shared silence, understanding blooms. Words will always have their place, kind words, true words, words of love. But let those words come from a man who could just as easily stay silent and still be sure of himself. That is a man who has found his whip, a symbolic whip of self-mastery that cracks not on the flesh of others, but on the petty, fearful impulses within himself. Such a man cannot be controlled by flattery, nor provoked by fury. Such a man, whether in love or in life, moves according to his own truth. And that ultimately is how one triumphs without ever needing to raise his voice. The most eloquent victory is the one achieved in silence, dignity intact, and eyes wide open. In that silence, you may just hear the quiet applause of a certain German philosopher, nodding in approval from beyond the veil of time.